Some men carry legends in silence, hidden behind wrinkles and tired eyes. In a small industrial town, people thought John Morales was nothing more than a fragile old man sweeping floors in a garage. At 73, with shaky hands and a quiet smile, he looked invisible among younger mechanics covered in grease and laughter. But what no one imagined was that John once shaped engines that roared on racetracks, taught minds that became industry leaders, and carried stories of machines worth millions. Soon, a broken luxury car and one arrogant customer would reveal the truth. The janitor was not just an old man. He was the forgotten master of the craft. The morning whistle from the steel plant drifted over the river and settled on Miller Auto like a low note. Robert Miller stood at the roll-up door, coffee cooling in his hand, watching steam rise from the cracked asphalt. He was 37, lean, with the permanent squint of a man who measured life in invoices and oil changes. The shop smelled like burned ATF and old rubber. A radio in the office muttered country songs through static. It was payday Friday, and the ledger had more red than he liked. "Boss, the Civic's back," called Drew, the youngest mechanic, his snapback turned backward, fresh tattoos peeking from his sleeve. "Same misfire." "Number 3 coil," Robert said, more to himself than to Drew. "Should have swapped the whole set." He took a sip, grimaced, and checked the time again. At 7:58, the door opened and a man stepped in with a careful, almost apologetic gait. He wore a clean plaid shirt tucked into khakis polished by years of use, and he carried a small canvas tool roll under his arm like a book. His hair was white and thin, combed with respect, and his brown eyes had the steady look of someone who had watched many long days unfold and learned not to rush them. "You're early," Robert said, setting down the cup. "I like that." The old man smiled. "Old habits. John, right? John Morales?" Robert checked the sticky note on the counter with the desperate handwriting he'd scribbled last night when he decided to give the guy a chance. He needed help, any help, and a man asking for light work at minimum wage sounded like a mercy wrapped as a solution. "Yes, sir." John's voice was soft but not weak. "Where should I start?" Robert glanced at the schedule. 3 oil changes, a brake job, the Civic with the stubborn misfire, a rattling Silverado nobody could pin down, and a diagnostic request from a local roofing company with a van that ate alternators for breakfast. They didn't need more bodies on the wrenches. They needed time. Still, pity and pressure pushed the words out. "For now, sweeping, cleaning bays, keeping the coffee going," Robert said. "Stay out of the way of lifts, watch your step. We'll see how you do." Drew and Ty exchanged a look, half grin, half eye roll. Ty, broad-shouldered with a beard like wire wool, flicked his chin up at John. "Brooms by the parts washer, Pops." John didn't flinch. He nodded, set his tool roll on the counter with a careful pat, and found the broom. He took a long look at the floor, like a carpenter reading grain, and began to sweep with slow, even strokes. Dust gathered in obedient lines. Robert told himself it felt good, doing something decent, offering a man work when most people wouldn't. He swallowed the other truth. If this didn't turn into profit soon, a clean floor wouldn't matter. By 8:20, the shop was alive. Impact guns barked. The radio lost the country singer and found a baseball call. A customer in a sparkly denim jacket complained about a squeal. That only happens when the moon is sideways. Robert moved between bays, answering questions, signing for parts, wiping his hands, checking the clock, hustling, always hustling. He noticed things about John without meaning to. The old man coiled air hoses so they wouldn't kink. He labeled a box 10mm and placed the lonely sockets there as he found them, like a man returning strays. He refreshed the coffee before anyone asked and quietly placed a freshly folded rag under a leaking jug of coolant. "Hey, Drew," Robert said, pointing at the Civic. "Swap all 4 coils. Customer's already approved. And check plug gaps. If the last guy eyeballed it, we'll be seeing her again." Drew smirked. On it. As Robert turned, John's broom paused. "If you still have the old coils, it might help to swap number 2 back in before replacing all. If the PCM's compensating for a voltage drop on one bank, you'll chase it all day." Robert blinked, surprised to hear that from the janitor. "We've got approval for the set." John nodded. "Good. Just saying, if it comes back, I'd look at ground strap corrosion near the radiator support. Seen it throw weird shadows." Ty's chuckle was quick. "Ground strap shadows, huh? That's new." John smiled gently, as if the joke landed somewhere safe. He kept sweeping. Before lunch, a woman in scrubs rolled in with the Silverado. "Rattles like a pocket full of nails," she said, biting her lip. "Only when I hit 40. And my husband swears it's the exhaust heat shield, but he also swore he'd fix the fence in June." "I'll take a listen," Robert said. He waved Ty over. "Road test." Ty took the keys, twirled them. "Back in 10. John, still sweeping near the door, straightened slightly as the truck idled past. His head tilted the way a dog listens for its name in a crowded room. He didn't say a word. The roofing company van came next, coughing like a smoker. The owner, a sunburned man named Mike, slapped a hand on the hood. "Alternator again. 4th one this year. Tell me I'm cursed. Go on." "No curses," Robert said. "Let's figure it out." They pulled the van in and popped the hood. Heat rolled out. Drew clipped on the tester. Voltage was low, then dipped again when the blower fan was switched on. The alternator whined. "Cheap Riemann's," Drew said. "Told 'em last time." "Maybe," Robert said. "But 4 in a year?" John set his broom aside, wiped his hands on his shirt, carefully, like he didn't want to leave a mark, and hovered a respectful distance from the open hood. "Mind if I look?" he asked. Mike blinked. "He's the janitor, right?" Robert hesitated, then gestured. "Quick look." John leaned in, not touching, eyes moving like a scanner. He followed the alternator lead to the junction block, the block to the battery ground to a frame connection fuzzy with green bloom. He kept his hands behind his back. "You might clean that ground and the one under the headlight," he said, voice even. "If the system's searching for a clean path, the alternator runs hot and fails early. Also, see that subwoofer wire? Tied straight to the battery with a cheap crimp. When the crew cranks music, the voltage spikes are real." Mike laughed, a little stung. "Guys like tunes." "Sure," John said. "Maybe run it on a fused line off a distribution block, less stress, and add a better ground strap from block to chassis." Ty returned from the road test in the Silverado, eyebrows up. "Rattle's not heat shield. Feels like something harmonics, like a vibration only at 40-45. Robert looked from Ty to John. John touched the broom again, like a man returning to his post. "Check the drive shaft carrier bearing. Sometimes the rubber splits, looks fine sitting still. At 40, it sings." Ty frowned. "How would you—" "Seen it," John said simply. Robert made a small decision he didn't announce to anyone. "Ty, check the bearing. Drew, clean and redo those grounds on the van. And for the love of God, fix the subwoofer wire." He followed John to the coffee pot. "You've been around cars." "A while," John said, pouring a thin stream. His hands were steady. "Mostly listened to them." Robert waited. The old man didn't elaborate. The radio called a home run, and someone in the office cheered like the team could hear them through the static. Drew hollered 15 minutes later. "Yo, van's charging at 14.2 now with the blower and lights on, and it sounds happier." Mike slapped Robert's shoulder hard enough to sting. "If this holds, you're my guy again." Ty's voice came from under the Silverado. "Carrier bearings toast. Rubber's split like a bad bagel. I hate when the old man's right." John didn't react. He was busy wiping a grease smear off the glass on the office door with the practiced circles of someone who cared about small things. By 2 o'clock, the shop's pace had settled into a steady, workable grind. Customers came and went. The register chimed. Robert felt a little less like a man standing in rising water. He caught himself watching John the way you watch a machine you didn't know you needed. The old man moved without hurry, but time seemed to bend around him. A mess left itself in front of him and appeared sorted behind him. A question floated and found an answer near him without noise. Near closing, a black Mercedes eased up to the curb and idled. It wasn't loud, but heads turned. The paint was the kind that swallowed light. A man in a crisp suit stepped out. sunglasses on despite the gray sky, phone glued to his ear. Robert's stomach tightened. He knew the type. Money first, patience last. "Who handles diagnostics?" the man asked without looking up from his call. "Because the dealership clowns wasted my morning." "We do," Robert said carefully. "What's it doing?" "Something it shouldn't," the man said, ending the call with a clean swipe. "And I need it fixed today." His gaze skimmed the shop, paused on Drew's tattoos, Ty's beard, then landed on John with the broom and stuck there, amused. "Cute," he said. "You folks hiring your grandfathers now." Drew snorted. Ty's grin had teeth. John's eyes didn't change. He lowered the broom and stood still, as if bracing. Robert felt an old anger rise, the kind that wants to throw a wrench and knows you can't afford to. "We'll take a look," Robert said evenly. "Write you up, run a scan, go from there." The man flipped the keys in a small arc that landed in Robert's palm like a dare. "I'll wait." Robert caught John's eye for the first time that day. The old man's look was unreadable, calm, almost kind. Then his head tilted, just slightly, toward the idling Mercedes. He was listening again. The radio in the office faded out as if to make room for whatever would happen next. "Drew," Robert said, feeling the thin edge between pride and panic. "Pull it in." John picked up the broom again and swept a fresh path for the Mercedes to glide over, as if clearing a small stage no one else could see. The Mercedes rolled into the bay like it owned the ground beneath it. Its quiet hum carried weight, a reminder that some engines were built not just for performance, but for status. Drew slid into the driver's seat, tapping the wheel like a drummer, while Ty watched from the tool chest, arms crossed. Robert entered the VIN into the computer, screen glowing pale blue in the dim shop. "Let's run a scan before we start guessing." The machine beeped, codes scrolled. "Misfire cylinder 5, fuel trim rich, evap leak." Robert frowned. Could be anything from a cracked hose to a bad injector. The man in the suit, who had introduced himself as Victor Hayes, stood in the doorway with a phone in one hand and impatience in the other. "How long?" "Hard to say," Robert said carefully. "Diagnostics take time." Victor smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Funny, the dealership told me the same thing, right before they failed." His eyes flicked again toward John, still sweeping. "Maybe let Grandpa take a stab. I could use a laugh." Drew chuckled under his breath. Ty grinned but kept quiet. Robert's jaw tightened. He wanted to fire back, but bills and payroll whispered louder than pride. "Let's start with basics," he said, ignoring the jab. "Drew, pull coils, check plugs." John leaned against the wall now, broom resting near his side. He didn't move closer, didn't intrude. But his eyes followed every motion. Drew removed the cover, set bolts in a magnetic tray, and whistled. "Plugs look new. Coils, too. Somebody's already thrown parts at it." Robert muttered. "That explains the dealership bill." Victor's voice cut sharp. "Are we fixing it or giving me a history lesson?" Ty opened the laptop with a grunt. Fuel trim still rich, O2's sluggish. Robert rubbed his forehead. "Might be an injector sticking. We'll need to pull rail." Victor groaned. "Another hour?" "You're kidding." For the first time all day, John spoke into the silence. "Excuse me." His voice was soft, steady. "Before you tear into that, may I try something?" Robert froze. The shop stilled. Drew raised an eyebrow. Ty mouthed, "Here we go." Victor laughed. "Please, by all means, entertain us." Robert hesitated only a second. Something in John's eyes reminded him of his late father, the quiet certainty that came from decades, not minutes. "Go ahead," Robert said, surprising himself. John stepped forward slowly, as if entering holy ground. He bent near the Mercedes, head tilted, eyes closed. He didn't touch. He listened. The idle ticked steady, but John's ear caught something, an offbeat, faint, like a whisper behind the music. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the driver's seat. Drew shrugged and slid out. John eased in, set his hands on the wheel like he'd done it thousands of times. He tapped the throttle gently. The engine rose, fell, stumbled just enough to leave a mark. His eyes narrowed. He pulled back out, wiping his palms on his khakis. "Check the intake runner flap," he said calmly. "It's sticking half open. Cylinder 5 starves at idle, floods when load shifts. You'll chase injectors all day, but it's breathing wrong." Ty blinked. "How the hell?" John smiled faintly. "Engines talk if you let them." Drew popped the intake housing, flashlight in hand. After a moment, he whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned. Linkage is binding. Plastic's warped near the actuator." Robert bent to look. The old man was right. He felt a strange thrill, like watching a magician pull a coin from behind your ear. Except this was no trick. Victor's smirk faltered. "So, you fix it or not?" "We can order the part," Robert said, straightening. "Might take a day or two." Victor scowled. "Unacceptable. I need the car tonight." John's voice slipped in again, almost gentle. "For now, loosen the linkage and realign. It won't last forever, but it will get him through." Robert met his eyes. There was no arrogance there, just quiet fact. He nodded. "Drew, do it." In 10 minutes the engine purred smooth, rich notes gone, misfire cleared. Drew shook his head in disbelief. "Runs like new." Victor stared, caught between relief and wounded pride. "Fine. I'll settle today. Send me the bill." He glanced at John again, this time without a joke. Something unreadable passed across his face. When the Mercedes rolled away, silence filled the bay like smoke. Drew broke it first. "How the hell did he know that?" Ty muttered. "Old man's got ears made of magic." Robert turned toward John. "You've done this before, haven't you?" John didn't answer right away. He picked up the broom, resumed sweeping as though nothing had happened. His movements were calm, measured. Finally, he said, "A long time ago I fixed cars when people still listened to engines, before computers told us everything." Robert pressed. "Where?" John smiled, eyes far away. "Everywhere. But that's another story." That night, when the shop closed and lights dimmed, Robert sat at his desk, staring at invoices. But his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on the old man, broom in hand, listening to the Mercedes like a priest at confession. The shop felt different now, like a secret had entered with John and refused to leave. Outside, the street lamps flickered on and John walked home alone, tool roll under his arm. His shadow stretched long against the cracked pavement, carrying pieces of a past no one yet understood. The next morning, Miller Auto smelled of cold steel and burnt coffee. A thin fog clung to the street, wrapping the shop in a gray hush. Robert unlocked the door early, restless from a night spent replaying the moment John silenced a luxury Mercedes with nothing but his ear and memory. He poured stale coffee into a chipped mug and leaned against the counter. Numbers still weighed on him: rent, payroll, overdue parts invoices. But behind the math lingered something else. Possibility. By 7:30, Drew arrived, yawning, earbuds dangling. "Morning, boss. Big day." Robert shrugged. "Every day's big if the lights stay on." Ty walked in minutes later, beard damp from a rushed shower, carrying 2 sausage biscuits. He tossed one to Drew and gave Robert a look. "You still thinking about yesterday?" Robert didn't answer, which was answer enough. Before long, the bay doors rattled open. The world outside woke, horns from the highway, a barking dog, the smell of bacon from the diner across the street. And then John walked in, plaid shirt, khakis, tool roll tucked under his arm. Always the same, always steady. "Morning," he said softly. Robert studied him a moment longer than usual. "Morning, John. Coffee's fresh. Well, fresher." John's smile creased his face. He poured a cup, then, broom in hand, moved toward the floor with his slow, careful strokes. The first job was simple: a Corolla oil change. Drew worked it with one hand, while texting with the other. "Car's older than me," he joked. John swept nearby, pausing when Drew struggled with a stripped drain plug. Without a word, John reached into his roll, pulled out a square extractor socket, and set it gently on the cart. Drew raised an eyebrow. "You just carry that around?" "Useful little thing," John said. Drew tried it, and the plug broke free like butter. He blinked. Huh. Guess the janitor's got tricks. John said nothing, just returned to his broom. By mid-morning, a Dodge Ram rolled in, brakes screaming. The driver, a construction worker still wearing his neon vest, looked weary. Pads are shot. Can't afford rotors if that's what you're gonna say. Robert took notes. We'll check it out. While Ty pulled wheels, John's head tilted again, listening. Back rotors are fine, he murmured. Front left's grooved. Pad cracked. If you machine the right one lightly, he can get by with just 2 pads. Ty gave him a look but checked anyway. Minutes later he cursed. Well, damn, he's right. The worker left grateful, Bill half what he feared. Robert noticed him shake John's hand on the way out. Word spread faster than oil on a shop floor. By lunch, 2 customers specifically asked, "Is the old man here? The one who fixed the bends?" Robert laughed it off, but something stirred inside him. The shop was no longer just surviving. It was buzzing. Still, not everyone felt the same. Drew muttered near the tool chest. Kinda creepy the way he hears stuff. Makes us look dumb. Ty grunted. Maybe we are dumb. Speak for yourself, Drew shot back. Robert cut in, firm. He's helping customers. That keeps the lights on. You got a problem with that? Drew shrugged, but his jaw stayed tight. That afternoon, a beat-up Impala limped in, exhaust rattling like coins in a jar. The owner, a single mom with 2 kids in the back seat, looked desperate. Please don't tell me it's the transmission. I just needed to get to work. Robert opened his mouth, but John had already stepped closer. He leaned near the hood, listening, then crouched low at the tailpipe. Not transmission, he said softly. Heat shield loose. A bolt gone. Ty lifted the car, and sure enough, the heat shield dangled, vibrating. A $2 bolt, 20 minutes labor. The woman nearly cried when Robert told her the price. She paid in singles, hugging her children close. Before she left, she whispered to Robert, "That old man saved me." Robert stood still long after she drove off. Something about the gratitude in her voice dug deeper than profit margins ever could. As dusk approached, the shop quieted. Only one car remained, a BMW 7 Series, sleek, black, too clean for their cracked lot. A young man in designer jeans leaned against it, scrolling his phone. Dad said you fixed his Mercedes. Thought I'd see if you're actually good. Robert tensed. Another haze. The kid smirked. Car stalls sometimes at lights. Dealer wants $2,000 just to inspect. You figure it out, you get my business. Ty muttered. Rich boys, man. Robert hooked up the scanner, but no codes. He scratched his head. We'll need to dig deeper. John stepped closer, listening again. He circled the car, eyes tracing lines only he could see. Then he touched the hood lightly, almost reverent. Throttle body sticking, he said. Not dirty. Electronics. A hairline crack in the housing. Heat expansion makes it seize, then release. Drew snorted. Yeah, right. You see that with your magic broom? Robert gave him a sharp look, but John ignored it. The kid raised an eyebrow. Prove it. John shrugged, calm. Take it on the highway. After 10 minutes, idle will dip. Light will flicker, then it'll surge. I've seen it before. Reluctantly, Robert and the kid drove off. 10 minutes later, they returned. The boy pale, Robert grim. He's right, Robert said simply. Throttle body crack. Needs replacing. The kid stared at John, respect mixing with disbelief. How do you... Never mind. I'll bring it back tomorrow. Fix it. When the BMW left, Drew slammed his wrench into the tray. This is ridiculous. He's not even a mechanic here. He's making us look like fools. Ty sighed. Or maybe he's making us better. Robert looked at John. The old man had already returned to his broom, sweeping as if the argument meant nothing. But Robert noticed his hands weren't trembling. They were steady, strong. For the first time, Robert wondered, who exactly was this man? What life had he lived before sweeping floors in his small-town shop? As the last light faded outside, John gathered his roll of tools and walked home alone. Robert watched him go, unease mixing with admiration. The town whispered now about the old man with ears sharper than scanners, the janitor who solved mysteries no one else could, and Robert knew. Whispers can grow into legends. Saturday brought a bright sun and a bank envelope Robert didn't want to open. He slid the letter under the keyboard like it could stop the numbers inside from existing. The shop smelled like fresh rubber and optimism he didn't quite trust. John arrived at 7:15, same plaid, same careful walk, the broom resting in his palm like a walking stick. He nodded to Robert, poured coffee, and began sweeping from the front door inward, like he was drawing a clean path for the day. By 8, the lot was full. An S10 needed a fuel pump, a Camry begged for new struts, an F-150 had a parasitic draw that murdered batteries overnight. Drew whistled low at the workload. "We're slammed," he said, half complaint, half pride. "Good problem," Robert said. He didn't sound convinced. The first flare-up came quick. A young woman in scrubs rolled in with a Kia that whined like a kettle. "I work double shift," she said, fingers worrying a name badge. "If I can't get to work, I'm sunk." Drew popped the hood, checked the serpentine belt, and called it glazed. He reached for the belt tool. John, 2 bays away, lifted his head like a hound catching scent. "Spin the idler first," John said softly. "Listen under load. Belt's crying, but the bearing's the one bleeding." Drew's jaw tightened. He spun the idler. It rasped like sand. He swallowed. "Ordering the pulley," he muttered. The woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all week. Ty clapped Drew's shoulder. "Hey, better to catch it here than on I-90. Drew shrugged him off. "Yeah, well, some of us learned with scanners, not witchcraft." Robert pretended not to hear. He assigned jobs, kept parts flowing. Still, the friction lingered like humidity. Near 10, a black SUV pulled in with tinted windows and polished wheels. Expensive, anonymous. The driver's door opened, and Victor Hayes stepped out. The suit traded for weekend navy, the same trim impatience in his posture. Robert's stomach did a small turn. "Morning," he said carefully. Victor didn't waste time. "I brought someone." The rear door opened, and a woman stepped out, tall, mid-50s, crisp blouse, tablet in hand. She had conference room posture and a gaze that catalogued everything. "I'm Elaine Parker," she said. "Hayes Motors, fleet operations." Robert's pulse ticked up. Hayes Motors fielded half the county's vehicles. If this was a visit, it was either blessing or storm. Elaine set the tablet on the counter. "We've got an electrical gremlin taking down 3 of our sprinters. Dealership has wait times I can't afford. Victor says you solved his intake issue quickly. I need to know if that was a fluke." Robert's mouth went dry. "We'll do what we can." Elaine's eyes drifted past him, slowed at John with the broom, then returned. "I want the fastest path to answers. Impress me." Ty cracked his knuckles, nodding toward the first van. "Let's dance." They pulled the Sprinter into Bay 2. Symptoms: random stall at idle, no codes, intermittent dash flicker, radio resets like a haunted house. Drew connected the scanner. It yawned back blank. "Loose ground?" Robert offered, defaulting to the week's greatest hits. "Already checked," Elaine said. 3 times. John stood at the threshold between sun and concrete, listening. He moved closer with permission written in his small steps. "Try the body control module connector," he said. "Not corroded, overseated. Pin tension gone lazy. Turn signals act drunk when it warms." Elaine's eyebrow lifted, amused. "That's a guess." John nodded like she'd paid him a compliment. "Yes." Ty pulled the side panel, exposed the module, and gingerly disconnected the harness. He inspected the pins, rolled one between finger and nail. "Pin 7's loose," he said, surprised. "Feels tired." "Spread it gently," John said. "And add a hair of dielectric. Don't drown it." They reconnected. The van idled steady. Dash stayed sober. Radio held station like a promise. Elaine didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped a fraction. "2 more vans show same ghost," she said. "Can you repeat this?" "We can try." Robert said, trying to sound like a man who expected to win. They repeated it twice. Both times, the same lazy pin, the same sober result. Drew stared at the module as if it had insulted him personally. Why would that even? He trailed off, frustration mixing with awe. Elaine tapped notes on her tablet. All right, she said. You've bought my attention. Victor leaned in. Told you, he murmured, not quite able to resist the victory lap. Elaine glanced again at John. What's his role? Robert answered before pride and fear could debate. He helps us hear what we miss. Interesting title, she said dryly. Hearing officer. Ty snorted. The morning surged. Cars cycled in and out. A delivery guy dropped off new shop towels and gossip. Someone sent pizza. John ate one slice standing up, then returned to his broom, his aura of quiet making even chaos feel organized. Tension finally snapped at 2:30. A high school kid in a rusted Civic rolled in, muffler held by baling wire and willpower. He parked crooked, music thudding. Drew stalked over, already annoyed. Dude, you're leaking oil like a crime scene. You can't drive this. The kid's face crumpled. I needed to get to work. I don't have money. Drew sighed, exasperation edging into contempt. Then you don't have a car today. John approached, gentle as shade. He crouched, peered under the Civic, then stood. Valve cover gasket, he said. We've got a spare on the shelf that fits. 2 hours, tops, Drew spun. 2 hours we don't have, he snapped, and a party can't pay for. Robert felt the shop hold its breath. The kid twisted his cap in his hands. I can sweep or something? John lifted a palm, not to the kid, but to the argument. He turned to Robert. I'll stay late, he offered. I'll do it. No charge. Drew laughed, sharp. Oh, sure. The janitor saves the day again. Why don't you just open your own charity shop? John's face didn't harden. It saddened. We all needed a break once, he said. Somebody gave me one. Drew stepped closer, a wire drawn too tight. Who are you, man? Seriously. You stroll in here with your broom and your magic ears and we're supposed to act like that's normal? You made me look stupid in front of a customer this morning. Robert cut in, palm up. Enough. No, Drew said, heat climbing his neck. It's not enough. If he's going to be calling shots, he should wear a uniform, not hide behind a broom. The shop went church quiet. Ty shifted, ready to insert himself if this turned into something uglier than words. John held Drew's eyes, not challenging, seeing. When he spoke, it was gentle, but there was steel threaded through it. I'm not here to make you small, he said. I'm here to make the work big. Drew blinked, anger wobbling. That doesn't even… Listen, John said. Not to me. To the engines. To the customers. To your own hands. If you do that, you won't need me. You'll be the man people ask for. Silence spread, then thinned. Drew looked away first, jaw working. Whatever, he muttered, but it sounded less like victory and more like retreat. Robert exhaled. We fixed the Civic, he said. I'll eat the part. John, you don't stay late. We all do. We're a shop, not a set of islands. Ty grinned. I'll pull the cover. Drew, you can run the bead. Drew paused, then nodded. Fine. They moved like a team again. Oil dripped, rags soaked, the rubber gasket settled like a thin halo. The kid watched, apology all over him. I'll pay you back, he said, voice shaking. I swear. Show up on time to work, Robert said. That's payment enough. At 4, as they cleaned hands and closed tickets, Elaine returned from a call. She set her tablet down, the screen bright with a spreadsheet. I've got authorization, she said. We're moving diagnostics and maintenance on 12 vans to you for a 90-day trial. Impress me, and it becomes year-round. Robert felt something expand in his chest he hadn't let himself feel in months. Hope that wasn't fragile. Ty whooped. Drew tried to hide his smile and failed. John simply nodded, eyes soft. Elaine extended a hand to Robert. One more question, she said, glancing toward John. What do I call him when corporate asks who solved the problem? Robert glanced at the broom, at the tool roll, at the man who made noise make sense. He smiled. Call him what he is, he said. Our master technician. John flinched almost imperceptibly at the title, as if it stirred dust on an old shelf. His fingers tightened around the broom, then loosened. He set it gently against the wall. Victor clapped once, satisfied, and headed for the door. Elaine followed, pausing on the threshold. 90 days, she said. Don't waste them. The bay door rattled closed behind them. The shop hummed on in the familiar way. Fans, compressors, distant traffic. But it wasn't the same place anymore. A line had been drawn in the dust, and they had stepped over it. Robert went to his desk, and for the first time in too long, pulled the bank envelope into the light. He opened it, looked at the numbers, and didn't feel panic. He felt a plan. He turned and found John watching him with that calm that had become a second kind of gravity in the shop. Thank you, Robert said. John's smile reached his eyes. We all swept, he answered. Outside, the sun softened. Inside, Miller Auto felt, finally, like a place that could carry the weight of a legend and also make new ones. The following weeks unfolded like a slow awakening. Miller Auto was busier than it had ever been. Bays filled from open to close. Word had spread across town and beyond about the little shop where an old man with quiet eyes could hear what machines whispered. Some came out of curiosity, others came out of desperation. All left with stories. Robert noticed it in the way customers lingered, shaking John's hand longer than they did his own. Your guy saved me, they'd say, not realizing John wasn't technically his guy. He was something else, something harder to name. The Hayes Motors fleet deal meant steady work. White vans lined the backlot like soldiers waiting for John's careful ear. Drew griped at first, but even he couldn't deny the old man's accuracy. It's like he's cheating, Drew muttered one day, though less angry than before. Ty laughed. You just don't like being shown up. Neither do you, Drew shot back. Difference is, I don't mind learning, Ty said, and left it at that. Robert watched it all, torn between pride and unease. Every problem John solved added value, but it also deepened the mystery. Who exactly had he been before broom handles and quiet corners? One evening, Robert found himself locking up late. John stayed too, folding shop towels with the same precision he gave to bolts and bearings. The hum of the soda machine filled the silence. You know, Robert said, leaning on the counter, you're not just a janitor. You're teaching these guys more than I ever could. John looked up, half-smile softening his face. I'm just passing on what was given to me. From who? Robert asked. For the first time, John hesitated. His eyes drifted to the shop wall, to a faded photograph of Robert's father with grease on his hands and a grin under his mustache. From men like him, John said quietly. Men who listened. Men who didn't rush. Robert blinked. You knew my dad? John's smile didn't change. Not directly, but men like him. They carried the same fire. He stacked the last towel and stood. Every generation needs ears, not just tools. The conversation ended there, but the words hung heavy in Robert's chest, long after the lights were off. The climax came on a rainy Thursday. A storm pounded the roof, water streaking the bay doors. At 10 a.m., a polished Cadillac Escalade pulled up, chrome shining even under the gray sky. Out stepped a man Robert hadn't seen in years. Howard Lang, owner of Lang Automotive, a shop across town with gleaming floors, spotless uniforms, and a reputation for squeezing every dime from his clients. Howard had been Robert's father's rival. When Robert inherited Miller Auto, Howard offered to buy him out cheap. Robert refused. They hadn't spoken since. Now, Howard walked in like he still owned the place. He spotted John sweeping and smirked. This is the famous miracle worker? Looks more like someone's granddad wandered off from the diner. Robert clenched his jaw. What do you want, Howard? Howard gestured toward the Escalade. Check engine light. Dealer couldn't find it. I figured I'd give your Janitor a shot. Let's see if the legend's real. Drew bristled. Ty scowled. Robert almost told him to leave, but John only set the broom aside and walked toward the SUV, his calm presence cutting the tension. He listened, leaned in, circled the Cadillac like he was reading Braille with his ears. Then he stepped back. Cylinder deactivation solenoid sticking. Not every cycle, just enough to trip the light. You'll waste weeks chasing wires if you don't start there. Howard laughed. That's your big answer? A solenoid? Check it, John said simply. Robert gave Drew a nod. They pulled the cover, tested the bank, and within minutes confirmed it. Solenoid binding. John was right again. Howard's smile faded. Lucky guess. Experience, John replied. The exchange felt electric, like a duel fought without weapons. Howard left without thanks, but his silence was louder than words. After he was gone, Drew turned to John, eyes wide. Who are you? For once, John answered without hesitation. I was a mechanic, for 50 years. I trained men who built engines you've only read about. But pride took it all. And when pride stripped me bare, all I had left was a broom. The shop went silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Robert swallowed hard. Then why come here? John met his eyes. Because dignity isn't in the past. It's in what you choose to do today, even if it's just sweeping floors. Ty exhaled, long and low. Drew stared at the floor, words gone, and Robert felt something shift, inside him, inside the shop, maybe even inside the town. The janitor wasn't just fixing cars, he was rebuilding people. That night, as Robert closed up, he caught sight of John outside under the street lamp. Rain fell soft now, misting the old man's shoulders. He carried the broom like a staff, standing steady in the glow. For the first time, Robert didn't see a janitor. He saw a teacher, maybe even a savior, disguised as one. And he knew. The story of Miller Auto wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to John Morales, too. The storm broke overnight, leaving the town washed clean by morning. Sunlight spilled through the bay doors of Miller Auto, striking the concrete in sharp golden lines. It felt like a new beginning, though no one said it aloud. By now, the shop carried a different weight. Customers arrived early, waiting in line just to speak with the old man who listens. Delivery drivers leaned in for stories. A retired teacher brought cookies, insisting John have the first one. What had once been a struggling garage was now a place whispered about in diners and truck stops. Robert felt it in the books, too. For the first time in months, the numbers turned black. Bills could be paid, tools replaced, even a new lift considered. Hope was no longer fragile. It was rooted. But change brings new tests. Late that Friday, just as the shop thought about closing, a sleek Porsche 911 rolled in, paint shining like liquid glass. The man who stepped out was not from their town. He wore a tailored suit, polished shoes, and the kind of arrogance that carried its own perfume. "My car," he said flatly, tossing keys onto the counter. "It dies when hot. Fix it. Now." Robert tried politeness. "We're closing soon. Might be better if you leave it and—" "No," the man interrupted. "I'll wait." He glanced around the shop, eyes landing on John. "That him? The miracle worker janitor I've heard about?" His laugh was sharp. "Perfect. Entertain me." The younger mechanics bristled. Ty whispered, "Guy's a jerk." Drew muttered something worse. But John only stepped forward, calm as always. "Let me hear it." The Porsche was rolled inside, engine fired, and John listened. He circled slowly, eyes closed, head tilted. The idle trembled, smoothed, trembled again. Minutes passed in silence until finally John touched the hood gently. "Fuel pump relay," he said. "Heat soaks it. Works cold, fails warm. Swap it, and it'll run fine." The man sneered. "That's it? A relay? I've paid engineers thousands for diagnostics and you say it's a relay." "Sometimes it's the smallest part that silences the biggest machine," John answered. Robert gave the order. Drew swapped the relay, a quick job. The Porsche restarted, purred steady. No stumbles. Perfect. The man's face drained of arrogance, replaced by something unfamiliar, respect, maybe even humility. He pulled a thick wallet, slapped bills onto the counter, and walked out without another word. When the Porsche left, silence filled the shop. Then Ty grinned. That's it. That's the moment. He's not just Morales anymore, he's the master. The name stuck. From then on, customers called him that. The master fixed my van. The master saved my truck. The younger mechanics whispered it too, though at first with teasing smiles. Slowly, the smiles became genuine. Drew, especially, began to change. He lingered near John, watching the way he listened, asking quieter questions. One evening, while wiping tools, Drew muttered, "How do you know when it's the right guess?" John shook his head gently. "I don't guess. I listen. And when you stop rushing, you'll hear it too." For the first time, Drew nodded without sarcasm. Weeks passed. The shop thrived. The Hayes Motors contract became permanent. Robert invested in new lifts, new tools, and even repainted the cracked office door. But the greatest change wasn't in the equipment. It was in the people. The mechanics stood taller. Customers trusted deeper. And Robert, once buried in worry, now felt something he hadn't in years, pride in his father's legacy, now alive again through the hands of a man who had once been invisible. One evening, Robert locked up and found John sitting outside on a bench, watching the street. The sun was low, painting everything in gold. "You never said why you left it all behind," Robert said quietly, sitting beside him. John smiled faintly. "Because I forgot what mattered. Fame, money, fast cars. They blinded me. I thought I was irreplaceable. Pride burned the bridges I needed most. By the time I looked back, the world had moved on." Robert frowned. "So why come here?" John's eyes softened. "Because dignity isn't in what you once had. It's in what you give away now. If I can pass on a little of what I know, then the years weren't wasted." They sat in silence, engines humming from distant traffic. Robert realized then that John wasn't just repairing cars. He was repairing people, himself included. "Stay as long as you want," Robert said. "This place, it's yours too." John chuckled softly. "I'm not forever, son. But the ones you train will be. That's what lasts." The final test came on a bitter winter morning, months later. The shop was full, heaters humming. A young woman arrived, engine smoking, tears on her cheeks. She had saved for months to buy that car, only for it to betray her days later. The other mechanics jumped to help, but it was John who stepped forward, calm and gentle. He didn't just listen to the engine. He listened to her. "We'll make it right," he said softly. Together, the team repaired the car. Drew led the fix. Ty backed him up. Robert watched with quiet pride. John stood nearby, broom in hand, like a shepherd watching his flock. When the car roared back to life, the woman hugged Drew, tears of relief streaming. And for once, Drew didn't look embarrassed. He looked proud. That night, Robert stood in the darkened shop, staring at the broom leaned against the wall. It was more than a tool now. It was a symbol. The man who swept floors had swept doubt, fear, and arrogance from all of them. John Morales, the master, was no longer invisible. He was mentor, teacher, legend. And his message echoed louder than any engine. Experience doesn't age. Dignity doesn't rust. And the true measure of a man is how many lives he lifts with him. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that wisdom never grows old. More inspiring stories are waiting for you here.